Morning, everyone, and welcome to our live webinar, Roadmap to ESOS, SECR and Carbon Compliance. My name is Nadine McLennan, and I'm delighted to be your host today. Please note that this webinar is emailing to you. There will be a Q&A questions during. So we know that navigating an ever-evolving landscape of sustainability. That's why we've put together two of our expert speakers, essentials and now about who we are. BCR Associates is a 20 years we've helped our energy management service tailored to give visibility confidence. So whether your goal is cost reduction, compliance, or net. In this session today, we'll guide you through the essentials and the various compliance schemes that they mean to business and how to approach them, with whether it's understanding your carbon footprint, knowing what data to align in compliance with your wider strategy, show you how it in a very clear way and relevant to your goal. To get us started, I'm Emma Dorma, guide you through the compliance in a clear and practical through the
Thanks, Nadine. Hi, everyone. I'm Gemma. Nice to meet you. I'll be going through the carbon reporting landscape today. So let's get started with the big picture. Why do these compliance frameworks exist? So they're not just box-ticking exercises. They are the building blocks for the UK's net zero journey by 2050. So SECR helps businesses to measure and report their energy use and emissions, while ESOS goes deeper, requiring energy audits that highlight where efficiency gains can be made. Carbon reduction plans then take this further, setting out how you'll actively reduce your emissions over time. So together, these frameworks generate the data and actions needed, not just for compliance, but to contribute to the UK's legally binding net zero target of 2050. So that's where the Climate Change Committee's carbon budgets come in. So the CCC sets out a 5-year emissions spending cap. So this keeps the UK on track. Up to now, we've made really good progress, but most of that's come from cleaning up the electricity grid. So that's shutting the coal plants, scaling renewables, etc. Looking ahead, the next phase is demand steeper cuts. The projection shows that we need other sectors to do the really heavy lifting now. So that's especially true for transport and reducing demand. So, for example, surface transport emissions will need to fall by about 86% from today's levels to 2040 if we're going to stay on course. So that's why frameworks like SECR, ESOS and carbon reduction plans are really important, because they give businesses the tools to understand, manage and reduce those emissions in line with these national goals. So compliance isn't just about government policy. The pressure is coming from all directions. Customers, supply chains, they're increasingly demanding emissions data as part of tender and procurement processes. Investors and lenders are also assessing ESG performance before committing funds, and even SMEs are feeling the shift. So if you want to stay competitive, you'll need to measure, manage and disclose your emissions. So there's also direct financial impacts of non-compliance. So non-compliance brings penalties, but the bigger risk is losing opportunities. More and more public sector contracts and private tenders will require carbon data and net zero commitments, and falling behind on these can literally just take you out of the running at the first hurdle. And finally, SECR, ESOS and carbon reduction plans give you the data backbone to build a credible strategy. So that means you can benchmark your performance, communicate your progress and stand out. So you can use your compliance as a baseline, and then ESG reporting turns that into a competitive advantage. So before we dive in, we'll do the terminology. So first, when are we reporting? This is for your reporting year. So companies commonly select a recent financial year or calendar year as a baseline. So you want this to be a business as usual year, so ideally not a COVID year or any periods of extreme change, so buying or selling business units, sites, etc. Once you've decided on when, we move on to how you decide what is in scope or your organisational boundary. So the two most common the two approaches are equity and control. So under the equity approach, you report the emissions in proportion to your ownership share of an entity. So if you own 50% of a joint venture, you report 50% of its emissions, no matter how it's managed day to day. This approach works really well, especially if you've got multiple investments, or commonly it's used by investment houses, where the control isn't in their hands. Alternately, we can use the control-based approach. So this focuses whether or not you manage or direct the activities of a site or asset. There's two sub-approaches. So the first is financial control. So this is if you can direct the financial or operating policies, even if you're not running it, it's included. So commonly this would be something like a majority-owned subsidiary, even if it's managed separately, but you control its finances, therefore it's included. The most common one, however, is operational control. This is used by about 80% of reporting companies. So this is where you have the authority to introduce and implement policies, or I like to think that you turn it on and off. It's in your footprint. So for example, if you lease a warehouse from somebody else, but you're managing its day-to-day operations, that's the emissions that are reported by you. So then we've set the organizational boundary. The next step is to define your reporting boundary and what is in scope. So carbon emissions are grouped into 3 scopes. So your scope 1 is your direct emissions. This is fuel that you purchase and you burn. So that's gas, diesel, kerosene. If you are taking it and you're the one that is burning that on site, that is your scope 1. Scope 2 is your indirect emissions. So this is where you have operational control, but someone else is burning the fuel, I like to think of it. So that's your electricity, your purchased heat, steam for industrial processes, etc. Then scope 3 is the largest category. It's your indirect emissions from your value chain, so both upstream and downstream. And this is broken down into 15 categories, which covers areas like waste, employee commuting, purchased goods and services, investments. And this, for most companies, is the largest scope of their emissions. That's up to 70 to 90% of their total footprint. It's also usually the most complicated to measure. But the golden rule is it can all seem quite complicated, but the golden rule is be consistent year on year and be transparent about your methods and assumptions. So especially the first year you're reporting, no one expects you to be perfect. There will be estimation within your data. There will be some assumptions. As long as you are clear, transparent, and following the basic rules from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, it's all okay, basically, is the message here. So now we've nailed down the fundamentals, let's move on to SECR, or the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting. So this is your kind of first level of carbon reporting. It sits right in your company accounts, hid inside the director's report. It's not hidden away in some sustainability brochure deep in your website. It's part of your statutory financial reporting. So that's deliberate, means investors, shareholders, whoever can see year on year what your energy usage is, what emissions, and what you are doing to reduce that. So it's mandatory for certain UK organisations. So if you're a quoted company listed on a stock exchange, you've got to comply no matter what. And for large unquoted companies and LLPs, you'll be in scope if you meet 2 out of the 3 criteria. So that's 250 or more employees, 36 million or more in turnover, or 18 million more on your balance sheet. And it's a mix and match between those, so any 2 of the 3. So every year you'll need to include a report, like the example you can see on your slide, and this will cover the key elements. So that's your total UK energy usage in kilowatt hours, and the greenhouse gas emissions for the categories within that in tons of carbon equivalent. So that will include your natural gas consumption, fuel and mileage from owned vehicles or reimbursed mileage of staff business travel, your electricity purchase for the grid, etc. So the next thing you'll need in there is an intensity ratio. So this is basically a way of putting your emissions into context. So that would be things like tons of carbon per million in turnover, per full-time equivalent, per item produced. It depends on what your business does and how that is best put into context for you. This is then followed by a methodology section. So this is where the kind of transparency bit comes in. So you'll include what guidance you used, what the boundary was, what conversion factors, your reference you've used, just to make sure that if anyone looks at it, they understand what you've done. So then the important section at the end is your energy efficiency actions. So what you've done throughout the year to make sure that you are reducing year on year what your consumption is. So that's to show progress. You're not just whacking some numbers in at the end of the year. You're actually taking action. SECR gives insight into your year-by-year operations, and it's a great start for considering your impact. We often use this as a backbone for carbon reduction plans, as you've got a record of everything you've done so far, and hopefully you can see a year-by-year reduction in carbon intensity. So, on to ESOS. So, ESOS, or the Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme, is the next level up for energy compliance. It's a mandatory energy assessment scheme for large businesses, and it's designed to help large organisations identify cost-effective, energy-efficient opportunities and reduce their emissions in line with the net zero targets of the UK. So who's it actually apply to? Under the rules, a large undertaking means you either fall in under your staff numbers or your financials. So that's 250 or more employees, or an annual turnover of 44 million plus and a balance sheet of 38 million plus. So it's a little bit different in SECR, where SECR is 2 of 3 and you mix and match. ESOS is either your staff or your financials. A key part of ESOS is it requires you to assess your entire energy usage. So you can't just pick the biggest sites or the easiest data sets. Your buildings, transports, industrial processes, it's all got to be included in that total energy calculation. So this is where some companies get into trouble, especially when they're navigating complex corporate groups. Common issue that we see is companies where the subsidiary, if you're a subsidiary of a parent company, especially an overseas parent, you don't know about each other. So if you've got one company in the UK group that meets the ESOS criteria, all of the companies in the UK in the group are then in scope. So for example, on the diagram on the left, B is the ESOS eligible organisation. However, A, being the highest parent in the UK, would be the reporting company. So this catches quite a lot of companies out. So just make sure that you check across your whole organisation. Another common pitfall is that large groups might do separate reporting, and sometimes you get subsidiaries that get left behind. So for example, if you're C1, right at the bottom of the chain there, and A is your parent company, A is the ESOS responsible undertaking. So they have to include the whole group unless they've agreed in writing separately with you. So if you're not sure, or you just want some reassurance, then yeah, please drop us an email. We can review it together and help you work it out, because non-compliance has some serious fines. You can get up to £50,000 from the Environment Agency for non-compliance, and that can be followed by an extra £500 a day for up to 80 days. Every day you remain non-compliant, so up to £90,000. That will also then be publicly available information. The Environment Agency publishes this, so it's really important to make sure that you're getting that right. So how do we get it right, and what are the deadlines? So I'll start with the deadlines and we'll go into a bit more detail. We've got the action plan update. The first one is 5th December this year. The second one is 5th December next year. The ESOS Phase 4 qualification date is the 31st of December 2026, and the submission deadline for that is the 5th December 2027. So I'll go into actually what that means and how we get there. So firstly, to do ESOS Phase 4, we'll want to measure your total energy consumption. So you'll need to account for all of the energy your business uses in the UK. So business, buildings, transport, industrial processes. You'll need to collect 12 months of energy data, mileage, fuel purchase, and renewable energy consumption if you have it. And this 12-month period will need to contain the qualification date. So normally either you'll be reporting the calendar year of 2026 or your financial year that spans 26-27. So it's at this point that we recommend companies conduct an ESOS readiness review. So in this, you'll want to understand what data you're going to need, because for ESOS, you need verifiable data. So you can't just have meter reads that someone notes down on a piece of paper or a spreadsheet. It's got to be verifiable. So half-hourly data is king here. It can offer us an insight into how energy is used on sites. It can also be useful for the auditing stage. So, for example, night and weekend usage commonly suggest wastage. If you've not got half-hourly data available, then you'd ideally want your monthly usage from your energy bills, or often, if it's included in the rent, you'll need things like a picture of the meter with a date. So you've got those verifiable data points. For other fuels, it's important that fuel volumes and mileage data is being collected, so you don't have that mad scramble at the end of the year to chase up suppliers or track down staff for that information that you need. So once your ESOS ready, you're going to decide on your route to compliance. So at this point, if your energy usage is under 40,000 kilowatt hours, you're exempt from ESOS. So for example, we've a company that we've seen that's got to this point is a investment house where they've fallen in under their financials, but actually there's only 3 of them in a serviced office. So there is minimal energy saving opportunity that they can do there. However, if you're not like them and you do fall into ESOS, which will be most companies that are eligible, you've got to pick whether or not you're going to appoint an ESOS lead assessor or complete ISO 50001. So if you do choose the ESOS lead assessor route, the next stage is your energy audits. So these audits are a deep dive into your areas of significant energy use. They look at how the energy is being used, where it's being used, where it's being wasted, what can be done to reduce it. And you'll need to do a representative sample of your company. So say, for example, you've got 10 sites and you've got 2 that are offices, 8 manufacturing. You'd audit 1 office and maybe 2 to 3 manufacturing sites. If each manufacturing site did a wildly different thing, you have to audit every single one. It's got to be representative of what your business does. So these audits must meet the ESOS standard and overseen and signed off by a qualified ESOS lead assessor. So come the end of the reporting period, you've got your 12 months of verifiable data, and using this, you identify your areas of energy intensity and calculate some energy intensity metrics. So this is a thing that was introduced for ESOS 3. Anyone who participated might remember having to go and scramble and find the area of their buildings that might not have been recorded somewhere. Anyway, so you have things like your kilowatt hour per square meter of building, kilowatt hour per mile travelled with your vehicles, etc. So it's vital that this stage isn't left too late with all the data, because there's often a lot of data that needs collecting and it's not always readily available, especially when you're having to request stuff from suppliers. So this then feeds into the final stage, which is where your lead assessor will complete your ESOS report and share that with the corporate group. So this then must be signed off by a company director after a call with the ESOS lead assessor, where you confirm that you understand their recommendations. Your designated ESOS platform user will then upload this into the MESOS platform, and this will be completed by someone within the company. It can't be done by your lead assessor or your consultant. So the compliance deadline is the 5th of December, but phase 4 is 5th of December 2027, but phase 4 is already in process. In order to meet the deadline, we suggest that businesses start thinking about it now, getting those audits booked in and the lead assessors booked. Basically, we found that the pool of lead assessors has shrunk significantly since ESOS 3 because of all the fun that came from the Environment Agency. So we'd recommend getting it sorted sooner rather than later. So before that deadline rolls around, if you're a company that took part in ESOS Phase 3, you'll have already submitted an energy action plan earlier this year or at the back end of last year, and that's due for your update on the 5th of December this year. The platform is open now, so you can submit that update now if you wish. And then the second update is due 5th of December 2026. So that's ESOS in a nutshell and how to achieve compliance. And the key takeaway is start preparing early. Data gathering takes time, and leaving it until last minute is risky. So far we've covered SECR and ESOS, the frameworks most businesses are dealing with right now. But the energy and carbon compliance landscape is constantly evolving, as anyone that did ESOS Phase 3 knows. There are a number of broader UK and EU sustainability reporting requirements that businesses should be aware of. So the first that they might come up, might be mentioned, just so that you're aware of what they are and where they're coming from. The first one is TCFD. So these disclosures technically it's closed. It's been integrated into UK law already under the company regulations of 2021, which requires certain companies and LLPs to include their climate-related reporting in their strategic reports. So this covers things like governance, strategy, risk management, metrics around climate change, and it's all about ensuring transparency and consistency for your stakeholders. So the next one is your UK Sustainability Reporting Standard, or the UK SRS. So this is currently in consultation, and once it's implemented, it will become the UK's primary framework for sustainability reporting. So it consolidates the existing guidance and aligns it with things previously set out in TCFD and puts it into a standardised format. It's also structured around the International Sustainability Standards Board's standards, so the ISSB, ensuring that it's compatible across the globe with other ESG reporting practices. And this, again, you'll be reporting your governance, strategy, risk, metrics on climate change, etc. If you're already complying with SECR and ESOS, you'll be ahead of the curve on this one, because that emissions data that you're already collecting will now feed directly into that. So then another one that you may have heard of is CSRD. So this is the EU's updated sustainability reporting framework, and following the Omnibus review, it applies to large companies in the EU that meets 2 out of 3 criteria similar to ESOS. And then they're looking to expand that to listed SMEs and smaller companies, and that's getting phased in over the next 5 years. So taken together, these frameworks signal a global shift towards mandatory, standardized sustainability and ESG reporting. So early preparation will give businesses an advantage, especially while supporting the wider net zero agenda. With these frameworks setting the expectation, businesses can take the practical step forward by formalizing this through all of the strategy and planning into a carbon reduction plan. So these provide a clear and actionable roadmap in cutting your emissions and demonstrate your commitment to net zero in a tangible way. So existing frameworks like ESOS can form the building blocks of this, since the energy audits will have already identified usage and efficiency opportunities. So this will help make it more practical and evidence-based for a company to work with. But they're essentially a public commitment to cut emissions work towards net zero. These will include your current carbon footprint, so your scope 1 and 2, and then often it'll be a subset of scope 3 emissions or the whole of scope 3. It'll then include your targets for reducing your emissions over time. Normally you'd have a near-term target, so say by 2030, if you want to be aligned with your science-based targets, reducing by 50%, or then you've got your long-term net zero target, say 2040, 2045, and then it'll include your actions and initiatives that you're taking to achieve these reductions. So they're increasingly becoming a requirement for doing business, particularly in the public sector. The UK has a specific one that's driving this, which is PPN 0621. This requires any suppliers bidding for central government contracts above 5 million a year to submit a carbon reduction plan that's aligned with guidance. So this ensures that the suppliers that are working with the government are actively contributing to the UK's net zero targets and reducing their environmental impacts. So to qualify for that one, you'll need a carbon reduction plan that has your scope 1 and 2, and then 5 categories of scope 3 as a minimum. So you've got your waste, employee commuting, business travel, and upstream and downstream transport and distribution. It'll then set out your commitment to achieving net zero before 2050, and you publish that on your website and update it annually. However, it is widely expected that by 2027, this will extend to all suppliers working in the public sector, regardless of your contract size. So early adoption will be very helpful there. Just make sure that you're using all the frameworks that you're already in to get the best advantage when you're trying to get tender ready. We're already seeing companies being asked their net zero targets, reduction plans, sustainability certificates like EcoVadis across the board. So whether you're working with universities, police, banks, or even Tesco, you don't want to leave it too late until you're losing business to have a look at it. So that's how the key compliance frameworks like ESOS and SECR fit together, how you can use them to not only stay on the right side of the law, but just to build a strong foundation for your sustainability strategy. Compliance is just one piece of the puzzle. The next step is showing leadership and going beyond what's mandatory and demonstrating your wider environmental, social and governance credentials. So to take us through that journey, I'll hand back to Nadine and introduce Steve, who'll be covering ESG frameworks like EcoVadis, B Corp and our own ESG impact report. Back to you, Nadine.
Thank you, Gemma, for breaking down those statutory requirements like ESOS and how they can underpin a sustainability strategy. As Gemma said, compliance is our baseline, meeting. But if you want to truly build trust and differentiate your organization, so that's where ESG comes in. ESG is demonstrate a state that you're not just following the rules, but actively leading in. Today, Steve will take us through recognizing frameworks and others, certification, our own ESG, explain how the values and stand out. Over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Nadine. I think one of the things I would like to start with is before we sort of get into what we've done and give you an idea of how to put together an ESG review, I want to cover what environmental social governance really is. I think that the challenge, I think, for any business is when you look at the frameworks that are out there, it's really important for you to be in control of what you're trying to do and understand what your clients are doing and what they're trying to do in terms of their frameworks, so that you're aligned to them, so you retain your business. So looking at this in very simplistic terms, environmental is, as it says, it's looking at climate change, biodiversity, water waste, really how you operate and how you impact on the environment. The social element is more a case of how you deal with your staff, how you deal with human rights, and more importantly, how you deal with the local community. And the governance overhangs all of that, of how transparent you are in terms of how you deal with this. So what I was going to do, I say today, was to go through our draft interim ESG report. And the importance of this is really straightforward. For us, when we looked at this, it was driven by who we deal with, the challenges they have, and what they're being asked to do in the supply chains they sit in, because everybody sits in a supply chain somewhere. And often it's dictated to by the head of that supply chain what you must comply with. And what we've trying to do with this is give you an example of how to put together an ESG report. Unlike what Gemma covered earlier, it's not governed by the size of your business. This isn't mandatory. This is often voluntary, but it's actually making sure that you protect your business both now for your existing contracts and also use this as a marketing tool for future business. And that's really where this is really a big plus in terms of how you can deal with this particular marketplace. So what I thought I'd do is I'd go through our plan just to give you some thoughts of things you should consider. Bear in mind, we can support you throughout this because it's what we do for a living. So when you look at any plan you put together, you look at also, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? Because part of the challenge is, what do we do? How do we do it? But more importantly, how are we qualified to do it? What are our qualifications that underpin what we do as a business? Because that's the bit that, excuse me, our customers will look at in terms of engaging us or not. And it'll be the same in your world. Whatever world you're in, it's what are your credentials to operate in that space? And part of that is understanding where your impact. So to put together a plan, very simple, executive summary at the front, highlighting the journey that we're going on in terms of our ESG reporting. A message from our managing director, the senior person, into our statement of how we do things. And that's really important in terms of actually building together an ESG plan. Then the next part of it is, who are you? So who are you? This is us as a business. So BCR down one side, and what we do down the other, our qualifications down the other side. And this underpins the journey we're going to take as a business. But more importantly, our clients can see very transparently what we're trying to do as a business and how we are going to market. And I think that's really important from your point of view, because this is totally transferable into your business model. Then I think the next element of that is, so what is our approach? Now, when we looked at this as a business, we looked at a number of different factors when we looked at the different tools that we could, and verification tools we could sign up for. And we looked at, firstly, the environment. What are we trying to achieve? Do we know our carbon footprint? How do we impact on the environment? What is our thought process for that? You have to engage your stakeholders, your people that work for you, because ultimately driving forward change is all about how you operate throughout all the layers of your business. And one of the elements we did when we looked at B Corp, we actually, before we even went into B Corp, we had a staff survey, had 10 questions specifically about B Corp. Should we do it? What are the benefits of doing it? How do you see it? And then we did a lot of briefing with the staff beforehand, just so they were fully committed to this. Because I'll give you an example. The whole idea of B Corp and things like that are all about how you're engaging your staff and how you're moving things forward. And I think that one of the elements that we saw was that I went out to a client and I went to the counter. They've got a big B Corp sign up, and I asked the person on the counter, "Oh, that's interesting. We're just about to apply for B Corp." The response I got was, "What's that?" That we have failed if we've done that. If we're going to move this forward, we move forward together. So our people are key. The other thing that we looked at from a business point of view was our impact on our community. We're a Southwest-based business. We're based in Exeter. Like most businesses, we're called up in our day job, where we're supporting our clients, and we actually weren't investing that much within the community. So we looked at what could we be doing better as a business for the local community we operate in. So those were the sort of challenges that set out our SG approach. We then looked at the frameworks that were right for us. And that was the sort of things that we could go into that would be verified, give us a clear path of how we could improve what we do. So we had first looked at B Corp. B Corp appealed to us as a business. There are a couple of fundamentals in B Corp you have to consider. Firstly, you change your articles of association. So you actually physically have to go in and actually put environmental aspects into your articles of association. So if you go to Business Cost Reduction Associates Limited, that's our actual limited company, BCR Associates, a trading style. On Companies House, you will see an amendment to our articles of association in the filing. And that was all part of our B Corp journey. We actually have in law how we're going to deal with the environment. It's not an option. It's in our articles of association. It's a big step when you make those sort of commitments. And then we went through the process of verification. And the one thing I would say with B Corp, it's a tough verification process. If we can't prove something, we can state we do it, but if we can't prove it, you're marked down on that process. So be mindful of that. But also what it does do is it challenges your thought process. We don't really do that in the way we would like to do. So as a simple example of that, when we went through B Corp, we said earlier, we didn't do enough in the community. We looked at what could we do. So we added into our employment contracts 4 days of paid voluntary work. So our staff now can take 4 days off a year, fully paid, and they can volunteer for local charities, local events that will actually help the community. That was something we thought was good for us to do, and that we added into it. We then looked at EcoVadis. Now, again, there are lots and lots of verification tools out there. Some are very industry specific. Make UK have one. The defence industry has JOSCA. They are all broadly similar. And the danger is you can spend all your day completing every voluntary form because your client's dictating you must do this. Actually, what we have found is by completing EcoVadis and going on the front foot with our clients, they're accepting that because it is exactly the same as what they're asking for what they would be doing in their world. So it's more universal. 150,000 companies in the world complete this. Big companies such as Mars, Rolls-Royce, HSBC, alongside people like L'Occitane and some very some retail brands. And we came in with a bronze certification in the top 31% worldwide. So we're really proud of actually getting that as our first attempt at actually going through this process. Our aim is to get to platinum. A couple of our clients are there already. We've helped one particular client get there this year. So that's really important to us. So we understand that process. We also then looked at the UN Global. The UN Global is more of a you sign up for the 10 principles of the UN, but why wouldn't you? They're the 10 principles around the environment, human rights, ethics. Those are the things that underpin good ESG programming. And then from that, we lifted, we completed the whole piece around sustainable development goals. You'll see the boxes there. And we selected 6 that were right for us, that we are going to look at how we can improve with those 6. Doesn't mean we'll ignore the rest, because we're actually improving throughout as we're doing as a business. So that's the journey we started in terms of our ESG approach. When you sort of break down ESG, you look at the environment first. Now, one of the things that we did a year ago, our year end is the 31st of January. So in the 31st of 24, we did our very first scope 1, 2, and 3. Gemma covered earlier the various scopes. I won't go into that in any more depth. But we came out with just over 43 tons of carbon in our first ever measurement. Now, understanding and measuring what you do then allows you to make good decisions. And from that, we have reduced, and bear in mind, we're a small consultancy office, we have reduced our carbon footprint by 10% within 12 months, just by looking at how we could do things better, monitoring what we're doing and making good choices. So that's really important. But what we've also done within the environmental piece is mapped out the next year. What's the next year look like for us? So our plan has what we have in it today and the road and the direction we're taking going forward. So that's very much important to us. The next stage, I think, were our people, as I said earlier, and it's really important because any business is as good as its people. So it's important that people are along the journey with you. They're the key stakeholders. They will drive forward this. And it's important that we're supportive of them. We get them to understand it. We do a lot of briefings around this. I said earlier, we had 4 volunteer days paid for by us as a business. We've done work with schools. We've done recycling. We've done beach cleaning. There are a lot more things planned. There will be work done over the Christmas period in helping the homeless. So those are the things that we will help in terms of, and we're investing in that because it's the right thing for us to do as a business. And we again have a clear plan going forward for what that would look like. The next element that we looked at was the community. And you'll see at the top of the picture, there's a Steve Warren Brown. Steve Warren Brown, one of the challenges you have in business is when you're looking to offset your carbon footprint, there are lots of schemes dotted all around the world in things like rainforests and various other parts of the world. We want to do something locally. We wanted to see what was happening in the locality, because ultimately we're creating the carbon in Devon primarily. We need to offset it in Devon primarily. That seemed logical to us. So we looked at the sort of projects that were happening locally. And Steve runs something called Social Tree. Social Tree is a piece that works with primary schools, and actually it invests in putting microforests into primary schools about the size of a small half-size tennis court, and it actually then gets the children involved in planting. They have some books that you can have with it, and they have a character called Mushy the Mushroom. And one of our staff, Gabby, on the right-hand side of that picture was Mushy the Mushroom for the day. So she had the delight of dressing up in the costume, but actually, again, it was really important that we got involved in key relationships locally that will improve the area that we create our carbon footprint. So again, that was really important to us, an important integral part of our ESG plan. And again, we have what we've got in the next steps. Bringing all this together, one of the key elements of this was how do we do business ethically? So again, as the key element of governance is transparency. It's being accountable and transparent in what you do. And also looking at things like supply chain, where the supply chain is coming from, how we can make sure that is also compliant. There's no point in us doing the journey we're on and our supply chain doing something totally different. And we've worked with a number of clients actually auditing their supply chain and understanding who their supply chain are, how they do business, and how this would improve their ESG reporting from a business point of view. We have an audit process in place. We have a pace of how you will score your staff, how you will score your supply chain, so that you've got an idea of giving them corrective actions to be better at what they do to help you on the journey that you have. And I think we pulled this all together at the end in what are the key KPIs that we're going to focus on for us as a business, and you would need to do the same in your business model. That would cover the environment, social and governance. And as you can see in the governance element of it, we've put the scores, current percentage scores we have from the UN's UN social development goals. The idea behind that was to give us a view of what can we improve on, where are the areas that are in our control, because it's all about what's in your control and what you can do better as a business, just being a good company. And then we put all that together at the end with what is there. And when you put a report together, you have to have the governance side to say what period is it measuring. And that's all this slide does at the end. It's important to control and manage the client's expectations. For us, I think the difficulty of this particular marketplace is that you could be asked to do very, very many different verification tools. Having your own ESG policy internally, deciding on the things that are right for you and externalizing that to your client will help you control that. Otherwise, you could be in a position where you're completing 7, 8, 9, 10 different verification tools. And that's not where you want to be. You don't want that to become a full-time job. So it's really important to control and manage that expectation externally. I think the key with all of this, we believe, and when you look at all ESG reporting, it builds trust. It builds trust. Transparency is key to any form of trust, and it completes your compliance efforts and pulls them all into one place. And I think what we've tried to do is we say this will go live on the 31st of August. So you've seen the draft format of the journey we've been on, and part of what we can do is support all of you on exactly the same journey. So I'm going to hand back now to Nadine, who will actually close today.
thank you again to Gemma. That was a fantastic overview of both. We wrap up. Take a few questions. So if you haven't already, please drop your questions into the Q&A box. If we don't get to all the questions, don't worry, we'll follow up after the session, or you can drop us an email at info@bcrassociates.co.za, and we'll. Just another reminder that you receive the recording today, and first question. We've got an ESOS Phase 4 question. So question 1, can we use ISO 50001 certification to comply with Phase 4? That is Gemma. Gemma, would you mind answering?
Sure, yes, of course. So ISO 50001, yes, it can be used as a route to compliance for ESOS Phase 4. However, it must cover 100% of your energy usage. So basically, just if you already have it, it's worth just having a look at it, making sure that you covered 100% of the energy usage across your business. If it doesn't, might initially need that you need to do add a bit more data in there, maybe do another energy audit. But otherwise, yes, you can use ISO 50001. It is the only other alternate route to compliance still remaining for ESOS Phase 4. Back to you, Nadine.
Thanks, Gemma. ESG questions. So the ESG reporting. So how do we choose between ESG frameworks like EcoVadis, B Corp?
I think one of the challenges in terms of this is actually it's important to understand your key clients and what they're looking at. One of the challenges that we saw when we looked at this whole marketplace was that if you sit in a supply chain, Tesco will dictate often what you need to do. But actually, all they're looking for is so they can complete their process. So the question is, if you're doing something which actually placates them, then actually that means you're in control. So it's really important for you to understand your client and what they're doing. One of the things I would always do is look at your top 10 clients that are important to you and do an audit of what they're currently completing. You know, what do they fall into the statutory requirements? Because there's certain things by law they will have to complete, maybe due to size or where they're trading. So if they're trading in certain marketplaces, financial world, etc., you will have to complete certain statutory reporting. But also, a large part, as I said earlier, is voluntary. So make sure that what you're doing voluntary-wise, you're doing in a way that you're telling your client, you're telling your account manager or your key clients what you're doing and why that will benefit them and make things easier for them in terms of their reporting.
Thank you, Steve. But you know what? Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and hope that you feel roadmap to complete. Until next time, take care. Bye. Any further questions or you'd like to contact us, please give us a call. 333 400 at www.bassociates.co.za. Thank you and goodbye.